Nobody helped me. I acted entirely alone. Those are the words of Georg Elser, a 36-year-old carpenter from a village of 2,000 people in southern Germany. He said them during interrogation, under torture, in a Gestapo basement. And after weeks of systematic brutality, his interrogators, some of the most dangerous secret police operatives in history, were forced to conclude something that shook them to their core. He was telling the truth. One man, no handlers, no funding, no spy network, no resistance group, no military training, just a carpenter, a bag of stolen gunpowder, and 13 minutes between his bomb and Adolf Hitler. This is the story they buried, because the Third Reich could not allow the world to know that a single ordinary man had come that close to ending it. On the night of November 8, 1939, a bomb exploded inside the Bürgerbräukeller, a massive beer hall in Munich, Germany. It was one of the most symbolically important locations in all of Nazi Germany. Hitler returned to it every year on the anniversary of his 1923 putsch to give a speech to the party faithful. The explosion shredded a pillar, collapsed the gallery ceiling, and brought the roof down onto the crowd. 8 people died. 62 were wounded. Chunks of oak and plaster fell exactly where Hitler had been standing 11 minutes before. But by then, Adolf Hitler was already on a train to Berlin. He had cut his speech short. A fog over Munich had grounded his plane, and he needed to get back to the capital by rail. He left the hall at 9:07 in the evening. The bomb detonated at 9:20. 13 minutes. To understand how one man got this close, you have to understand who Georg Elser was, and more importantly, who he wasn't. Johann Georg Elser was born on January 4, 1903, in Heromingen, a small farming village in the Swabian countryside. His father was a timber merchant and a heavy drinker. His childhood was harsh, his schooling limited. But from an early age, Elser showed a remarkable gift for working with his hands. He became a cabinet maker, then a carpenter. He was known in his village as quiet, meticulous, and exceptionally precise, a man who measured twice and cut once. He was not a politician. He was not a revolutionary. He attended Communist Party meetings sporadically in the early 1930s, not out of ideological passion, but because the meetings had music and dancing, and he liked to play the zither. He watched the rise of the Nazi Party the way most working-class Germans did, with a mixture of unease and resignation. But by 1938, something shifted inside Georg Elser. He watched his co-workers' wages being cut. He watched the price of food climb while the party bosses built monuments. He watched Germany march toward a war that he believed, with the clarity of a man who had never been taught to doubt his own instincts, would be catastrophic. And he arrived at a conclusion that virtually no one in Germany, no general, no politician, no diplomat, had the courage to act on. The only way to stop what was coming was to remove the man at the center of it. Not Germany, not the Nazi Party, one man, Adolf Hitler. He made the decision in late 1938, alone in his rented room. He told no one, he recruited no one, he asked for nothing. What he did instead was begin to plan with the same obsessive precision he applied to his carpentry. He chose his target, the Bürgerbräukeller in Munich, Germany. Hitler would be there on November 8, 1939. He would speak at the same podium in front of the same crowd as he had every year since 1933. The schedule was predictable. The location was fixed. The timing was knowable. Elser visited the beer hall multiple times before the event, studying the layout. He identified the pillar directly behind the speaker's podium, the structural column that would create the most devastating blast effect if destroyed from within. He measured it, he sketched it, he thought about it for weeks. Then he got a job at a stone quarry in Königsbronn, where he began systematically stealing gunpowder, small amounts stuffed into his pockets, carried out past the guards shift by shift. Over months, he accumulated kilograms of explosive material. He also stole detonators, clock parts, and fuse wire. He began building a timing device of extraordinary complexity in his room, a dual clock mechanism with redundant triggers designed to fire at precisely 9:20 p.m. on November 8th. He tested it, he refined it, he rebuilt it, he tested it again. By August of 1939, he was ready for the most dangerous phase. Beginning on August 5, 1939, Georg Elser began hiding inside the Bürgerbräukeller after closing time. He would conceal himself in the storage areas as the staff locked up, then emerge in the empty dark hall and crawl to the target pillar. Night after night, alone in the darkness, he worked. With hand tools, chisels, files, a small saw, he carved a hidden chamber inside the base of the oak pillar. The wood was thick, the work was brutal, and the noise could not carry. He wrapped his tools in felt to muffle the sound. He collected every wood chip and splinter and took them away in his pockets to dispose of them outside. He worked through the night and hid again before the morning staff arrived. 35 nights. Over the course of more than 2 months, Georg Elser spent 35 nights locked inside a beer hall, alone in the dark, carving the instrument of a dictator's death with his hands. When the chamber was complete, he installed his bomb. The device was extraordinary: multiple detonators, 2 independent clock mechanisms, a metal-lined cavity to direct the blast upward and outward. He sealed the compartment with a wooden panel, stained to match the surrounding pillar, with tiny ventilation slots to allow the clockwork to breathe. Then he walked out. He spent the remaining weeks before November 8th in a state of absolute silence. He told no one. On the evening of November 8, 1939, Adolf Hitler took the podium at 8 p.m. in front of nearly 3,000 party faithful. The atmosphere was tense. Germany was now at war with Britain and France. Hitler's speech was shorter than usual. He spoke quickly, without his usual rambling digressions. At 9:07 p.m., he left the stage and exited the building. At the Swiss border, Georg Elser was stopped by customs officials. He was carrying suspicious items: wire, a postcard of the Bürgerbräukeller, clock parts, and remnants of gunpowder in his coat seams. He was detained. At 9:20 p.m., his bomb detonated. The pillar disintegrated. The gallery collapsed. 8 people who had been listening to Hitler speak were killed in the rubble. 62 more were injured. The podium was buried under a meter of debris. If you're still watching, what comes next is the part of this story that changes everything. When the Gestapo connected the arrested man at the Swiss border with the explosion in Munich, they were certain they had uncovered a massive conspiracy. The British intelligence services, they assumed, a communist network, a shadow organization of dozens of operatives who had spent months planning the most sophisticated assassination attempt in history. They transferred Elser to Berlin. They tortured him. They applied every technique at the disposal of a regime that had refined brutality into a science. Georg Elser withstood it. Not because he was a trained agent, not because he had been conditioned for resistance, but because there was genuinely nothing to tell. No network, no handlers, no names, no money trail, no co-conspirators. Just a carpenter and his tools. The Gestapo chief, Heinrich Müller, personally oversaw the interrogations. He refused to believe the reports. He ordered the interrogations repeated, the techniques escalated. He brought in specialists. The conclusion never changed. Elser had acted entirely alone. Hitler ordered that Elser be kept alive and in isolation as a special prisoner. The official story given to the German public was that British intelligence had orchestrated the bombing, specifically that a captain named Best had directed the operation. Elser's name was never released. His existence was classified. The Third Reich could not allow its citizens or the world to know that one unarmed German worker had come closer to ending Hitler's life than the combined intelligence services of every Allied nation. He was transferred to Sachsenhausen concentration camp, then later to Dachau, where he was kept in a private cell in the SS barracks. He was given slightly better food than the other prisoners. He was allowed to play the zither. He remained there for 5 years. On April 5, 1945, with American forces closing in on Munich and the war clearly lost, an order came from SS Reich Security Office. Georg Elser was to be executed, and the death recorded as the result of an Allied air raid. He was shot in the neck in the Dachau crematorium on April 9, 1945. The war in Europe ended 29 days later. He was 42 years old. Think about that. The man who came within 13 minutes of preventing the deadliest conflict in human history was murdered 4 weeks before it ended, by the regime that had survived only because of those 13 minutes. His name was suppressed for decades. His story was dismissed as the work of British intelligence for years after the war, even as survivors who had known him tried to tell the truth. Today, there is a bronze statue of Georg Elser in Berlin's Tiergarten. There is a memorial at the site of the Bürgerbräukeller. A German film about his life was made in 2015. But for 70 years, the answer to the question, who came closest to killing Adolf Hitler, was not Stauffenberg with his bomb in the Wolf's Lair, not the generals who plotted in the shadows, not the Allied intelligence services with their vast resources. It was a carpenter from a village no one has heard of, who stole gunpowder in his pockets, who spent 35 nights alone in the dark, who built a clock that ran 13 minutes too slow. Or perhaps 13 minutes too fast. If this story stayed with you, subscribe, because the most important truths of the Second World War are the ones that fit in a carpenter's coat pocket.